Okay, Quebec 1759 or 1759 Siege of Quebec. We'll be looking at these two games, but the emphasis will be on Worthington's title, 1759 Siege of Quebec. Okay, we begin the video with looking at Quebec 1759, and it was the first Canadian subject war game that I'd ever purchased, and it was also the first war game ever produced by a Canadian company. I remember when I purchased it back in 1972 that the outside packaging gave you no idea of what treasures were inside. And it featured a beautiful period-looking map of the whole Quebec campaign, and it was the first block game that I'd ever purchased. You can see here the copyright is 1972, Gamma 2 from Vancouver, BC. Now Gamma 2 games later became Columbia, and I believe they're operating out of Seattle, Washington now. But one of the nice features of this game was the beautiful period type map. Now this is a later edition of the game, and later editions featured sort of gold painting on the embossed into the wood pieces. Later editions, the newest ones, now feature stickers that you put on the blocks themselves. Now at one of the conventions I got to talk with Mr. Dagliash, and he told me that the first edition was actually hand painted by his wife. Each of the blocks had to be hand painted, and I had that edition. I wish I'd kept it now. And they didn't use the short forms. For example, here it says TR. Well, that was Troupe de la Marine, and Q was for Quebec Militia. The original edition, if you have it, they will be hand painted on there. And that was just a beautiful addition indeed. Now in this game you wrote down your moves on a piece of paper, whether or not you were moving from, let's say, Abraham to St. Charles, or St. Charles to Beauport, that kind of thing. Now let's fast forward, at least 30 years. I still like this game, and I decided to spiffy it up a bit by making some cards, and you could save writing down. So I made up little cards, whether you were moving to Ile d'Orléans, or St. Charles, or Sillery. I also made some command cards, showed you how many blocks you could move, things like that. I thought the game needed a little bit of spiffying up and just bringing it into the 21st century as far as games are concerned. Now, I'm not taking a backhanded slap at this game at all. It was a wonderful game for 1972, and if you play it today, it's still a lot of fun. Now, the reason I'm including it in the video is because this game influenced my decision on the Worthington game. So when this one came out, I didn't pay much attention to it. I just took a quick look at the map and thought, well, it's probably just a variation of the good old Quebec 1759, which itself was still in print from Columbia, and they had modified it over the years too. So I really kind of ignored this game for, at least a year. I think it came out in 2017. So I recently purchased it after doing more research on it, reading about it, and downloading the rules. Certainly those companies that don't want to make their rules available online are making a big mistake, because it was reading the rules on this game that made me finally decide to purchase it. And we'll take a brief look at this game. Now, I'm not going to go through a whole playthrough of the game itself. Several other people have done good videos on the playing of it. I know Marco Arnardo did a very good video on the playing of it, and those are on Board Game Geek. So if you're expecting a playthrough, we won't do that. I'm just going to show you some of the features of the game and explain to you why I think this is a great introductory game, a very good game. For those of you interested in the Siege, there's quite a lot of good literature out there. I've amassed a few books over the years. Oliver Warner's With Wolfe to Quebec, done in 1972, is quite good. You've got John Knox's memoirs, who is an eyewitness to the siege, British. More recently, Stephen Brumwell did an excellent biography of the life and death of James Wolfe. I particularly like this one. Another good one was Gordon Donaldson, Battle for a Continent, Quebec 1759. The Rest of Fortune, The Life of Major General James Wolfe by Robin Riley. And not too long ago, more memoirs by James Thompson, who is a gentleman volunteer in a Scots regiment, a bard of Wolfe's army. So there's lots of good literature available out there. Let's take a look at the map. Okay, for those of you that are not familiar with the campaign, Wolfe's army came up here and landed on Ile d'Orléans, the island of Orleans, about the end of June, and Saunders' fleet anchored here, behind the island. Now, because the game starts with British units already at Montmorency and units at Lévis, this gives us a clue as to when the game starts, because the bombardment of Quebec did not begin till about July 12th. So this game starts a bit later than the Gamma 2 title. There, every single unit of the British starts on Ile d'Orléans. So this game starts a bit later. The British are partially established at Lévis and at Montmorency. Now, in the historical battle, Montcalm's forces were arranged from Montmorency all the way down through Beauport to Quebec City, and they later crossed the river to harass the British batteries. So this game takes a little bit different tack than the Gamma 2 game. Also, the fleet starts here in the lower Saint Laurent. Now, these ships, by the way, are just another, they're from another Worthington product. I just use them instead of the blocks you're supposed to use. You're supposed to set up the ships like that. And I thought, well, since they're ships, these look a little cooler than wooden blocks. So I'm even thinking of doing some miniatures for these later. So that's the setup. And it is very much a war game, but it's an abstract war game. It's almost a card game with a board. Let's take a look at some of these cards. Okay, you get several sets of cards in the game, and when you first open the box, it can be a little confusing. But if you read the rules, you'll soon sort of get what's going on. But overall, they've designed the game brilliantly so that there's a solitaire game. You can play as the French solitaire, you can play as the British solitaire, or a conventional two-player game. And that's where the decks come into play. If you're playing the solitaire game as the French, you'll just be using one of these decks. So if you're the French player, you'll be shuffling these cards and flipping over so the AI player plays against you. That's how that works. Now if you're playing two-player, you're going to have this common deck shuffled face down. And as the British player, you'll have 7 different attack orders and counterattack orders, 4 of them. And as the French player, you'll have 7 attack orders and 4 counterattack orders. And when you're playing two-player, the British commander will take one of his campaign cards, put it face down. He'll also choose a counterattack order face down. The French player will do the same. Pick one face down, pick one face down, and then the British commander will place his attack order face up, and the French player will take his counterattack card and face up. Then you'll do the action, and then the French player will do his order, and the British player will do his counterattack order. That's generally the way the game goes. And of course there's die rolls involved once you get to these tables to see what the losses are and the effect on the game. They've also got a brilliant balancing mechanism, which is worth just mentioning here from the rules. So if you want to play a real tough game against the British, you have 27 cards or more in the deck. If you want a weaker game, or more chance for you to win, you'll take 20 cards or less. So the amount of cards in the deck is the way of balancing the game, which is really interesting. It's also a way of, you might say, manipulating the turn record, because if you have less cards in the deck to draw from, you're representing a shorter period of time for the British to take Quebec. So that's overall how the game plays. Let's take a look at these little portfolio cards that you get. Now each player gets one of these wonderful field order portfolios, and they're cardboard, good quality. Of course, they're made to look like an old ancient leather portfolio. Commande de terrain for the French, and field orders for the English. So when you open it up, it gives you a list of all the commands that you are allowed to do each turn. And there are 7 of them. And as an option, there's also this aggressive command or action, which will modify the results on the plan you've taken, usually giving greater morale effects or more losses. Now the British player also has his portfolio designed in a similar manner. So it's a simple game to teach, actually. You can teach the thing in, I'd say, 10-15 minutes. And I haven't played 2-player yet. I've only played solitaire. And in the solitaire game, I took the French and won the first time. And I said, oh, okay, is this balanced? Maybe I was lucky, don't know. Then I played the French again and got horribly defeated, which was very interesting. And then I played the British, and I won very close to the end of the game. So the balance certainly appears to be there. And Worthington has done a beautiful job on creating player aids for this game. Now, it's not a conventional war game in the sense that you line up counters against the other guy and start rolling dice to see who takes losses. This is very much the siege of Quebec, the overall situation, what's happening. But generally what you're doing with your cards and your strategy is you're trying to remove enemy blocks from the board. And every time you move an enemy block, his morale goes down 1 notch. So for example, if the British in their campaign card roll the dice and the French had to remove 1 block, they would remove a block and their morale would go down 1 notch. The ultimate objective is to get your enemy's morale down to 0. When you do, you've won the game. Now, there's certain special rules for the Plains of Abraham, as there should be. And more or less the requirement is that Saunders' fleet of at least 2 ships gets into the upper St. Lawrence. And when you do, then Wolfe has this attack order, attack Quebec. That can only come into play when Saunders has units up here. Also, it only comes into play when the British actually have troops on the Abraham Square, which they don't at present. That's the setup. So you're going to generally have to get your ships up there, get your troops onto the Plains of Abraham, and then you can do your attack order of Quebec. Of course, the French player will be pre-alerted when he sees your ships going up there. That's the fun of the game. The British and French have lots of options to thwart the other's plans. Let's look at some of the French options. Well, you could perform Indian raids on the British, trying to reduce their size. You can just hold where you are, just defend. Let the British come at you. You can attack Lower Quebec, which is in the basin here. Or you could attack Upper Quebec, which is trying to reduce these British here at Lévis. Or attack the British at Abraham, something you'll have to do if they ever get there. Move troops. You might want to reposition troops from Montmorency or Beauport over to the plains. And then you've got this French aggressive action, which you're allowed to do over and above the other actions. And that causes things to be more bloody or perhaps reduce French morale. Should have said British morale. Now, here's the British orders. Attack Quebec itself. Attack Upper Quebec. Move troops, just like the French. Bombard Quebec. It's an option the French don't really have. They bombarded the city from Lévis in real life. Destroying the city, actually. You've got the British aggressive commander action. And you've got the attacking the villages. This is sort of lay waste to the countryside, which causes all kinds of bad things for the French. And you can move one ship up into the upper St. Lawrence. So the British have plenty of options also. The beauty of the game is in the combinations and die rolls of the actions of the French against the action of the British, and the counterattack options of each side, and of course the inevitable die rolls. So you've got 3 sets of things going on. I think there's going to be lots of variability in this game. And like I said, the cards are a beauty to look at. There's just wonderful artwork on them. The whole game gives me a good period feel. The rules are only 12 pages long. They're available online as a PDF file in color. There's a page of historical notes. So we're talking actual rules, maybe 11 pages. It's profusely illustrated. I don't see any problems with this game. It's done on nice quality shiny paper. I know a lot of people don't like this new shiny paper, but it certainly is a nice looking game and easy to learn. So that's my look at 1759, Siege of Quebec by Worthington. And they hint that it's going to be part of another series because they've got here part of the Great Sieges. So we might see other titles using this system. I know they've got a Freeman's Farm battle system coming out. I think it's shipping in October, and I pre-ordered it. Now, Worthington has never disappointed me for components. They always give you a really good quality product. And personally, I think Quebec, Siege of Quebec, 1759, is one of their best efforts. So that's it. Thank you for watching.